Unit 10. It's in the DNA. Page 88. Listening for main ideas. A. Close your book, listen to the lecture, and take notes.
Good morning. Today, we'll talk about an important topic in biology, DNA and DNA testing. Can anybody tell us what DNA stands for?
Deoxyribonucleic acid.
Right. It's the molecule that carries genetic information in all living cells. Now, first, we'll look at what DNA is and when it was discovered. Then, we'll look at DNA testing and several applications or uses of testing. This is an exciting topic for biologists because the more we learn about DNA, the more we see how science may change our lives, from healthcare to our relationships. Okay, what does DNA look like?
It looks like two strings, kind of wrapping around each other.
Yes, exactly. There's a simple drawing of one in your book. As you can see, a molecule of DNA consists of two strands of chemical compounds arranged in a twisted pattern. Inside the human cell are chromosomes. The DNA is organized in 23 pairs of chromosomes in the cell. Genes are arranged on the chromosomes, and these carry fundamental genetic information like hair color, eye color, or characteristics that aren't as visible, such as intelligence, and a lot more. Scientists have been studying DNA for a long time. First, in 1860, Gregor Mendel made two important discoveries: tiny particles he called genes, and that genes carry information from cell to cell. Now, this was really the beginning. Then, in 1953, J.D. Watson and Francis Crick discovered and described the DNA structure. Their work was so important that they received the Nobel Prize in 1962. For the first time, scientists could understand exactly how DNA tells the cells what to do. This generated more DNA research. And by the end of the 20th century, scientists made other important discoveries. Probably the most important work was the Human Genome Project. The goal of the Human Genome Project was to complete the first reading of the human genome, the complete set of human DNA. This was a huge job, but after 10 long years, in June 2000, the head of the project announced that they had identified the complete set of human genes. This was a huge deal. Most people saw this as the beginning of a new era in DNA research. Scientists could read all of the genetic messages in the human body. This is, of course, a very brief history of the study of DNA. All right, let's consider DNA testing. One important use of DNA testing is testing identity, which is also called DNA fingerprinting. Here's how a DNA fingerprint is done. Scientists take a small sample of someone's hair or skin, which contain DNA. Next, they treat the sample with chemicals and make a film, like a small photograph. On this film, there is a visible pattern of black bars. This pattern of black bars is unique for each person. So, a DNA sample from your hair identifies you. It's like your fingerprint. It identifies you and you only. I see a question, Miguel?
Does the DNA from hair or skin or blood all look the same?
No, not exactly. The DNA from your hair will look like hair DNA, but it will be uniquely your DNA pattern. It's sort of like all noses look like noses, right? But your nose looks like your nose only. Now, I want to look at two applications or uses of DNA testing. First, how it can be used by doctors, and second, how it can be used by the police. Within healthcare, one important use is to identify potential for health problems. Researchers have found some genes linked to specific diseases. For example, Huntington's disease is linked to a defect in chromosome 4, and Alzheimer's disease is linked to a defect in chromosome 19. A genetic link means that doctors know that if someone has defects in these genes, they're more likely to get these health problems. Their potential is increased. Notice I didn't say researchers have found that some gene defects cause specific diseases. There is simply a link. After doctors perform DNA testing, they can then decide the best way to use the information. For example, they may give medication to a patient to prevent a disease from ever starting. Genetic testing can also be used to decide which medicine to give someone. This is called targeted medicine. To me, this is very exciting and promising. There are tiny differences in DNA from person to person. These differences can affect which patients will be helped by a drug and who may be harmed by it. This is a tremendous advantage. It saves lives and money. Now, let's look at how DNA testing is used by police. The police can use DNA fingerprints to identify and trace criminals. All they need is a small amount or trace of blood or hair from the crime scene. If the DNA samples from the crime scene and the suspect match, the results, at least in the United States, can be used as evidence in court. So, DNA testing can be used to help put someone in prison. In much the same way, DNA testing can be used to help innocent people in prison. People in prison can now try to use DNA testing for crimes that happened, say, 10 years ago. If their DNA fingerprint doesn't match the DNA fingerprint from the crime scene, this can help them get a new trial and perhaps get them out of prison. As you can see, there are benefits to DNA testing. However, there are also some concerns that this type of information might be used against us in the future. Now let's consider how DNA testing could be used against you. What if a company you wanted to work for asked you to take a DNA test? And what if your DNA test showed that you had a gene defect linked to a certain type of cancer? Would the company decide not to hire you? People also worry about health insurance. They're afraid they might not be able to get health insurance if their DNA test shows they're at a higher risk for certain diseases. As a result, in the United States, some laws have been passed to protect the privacy of medical records. Now, DNA testing has other possibilities that we won't discuss today, but in any case, many people think about the negative uses of testing, the fear that it will be used against people or to create perfect babies. Others think about police being able to trace criminals and possible advances in healthcare. But another way to think about it is that it tells us more about who we are, and that's the goal of biology, to understand nature. I guess I'll stop there for today. In the next class, I want to talk in more depth about uses of DNA testing by doctors. Okay, we'll start there next time. That's all for today.
Page 88. Listening for details. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture again. Add supporting details to your notes, and correct any mistakes.